So, Andre, one question.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Let's give colleagues another minute or two before we start. Thank you for joining. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the second session of the data visualization and communication training. My name is Andre. I work as a data analyst with UNDP, and I support the coordination of the Data for Now initiative. Welcome again, and we're really looking forward to this. Anastasia, can I have the next slide, please? Thanks. This is session 2. In the previous session on the process of data visualization, we covered some of the basics in terms of the building blocks of data visualization, the design thinking process that can help build effective visualizations, as well as a few different kinds of charts that you can use in your day-to-day work, and some of the fundamentals for geospatial. Today, we're going to cover the classic tools and resources, and give you a little bit of a background in terms of how what the anatomy of a chart looks like, so you can use this theory in essentially any tool that you decide to use going forward. And we'll also cover a few online tools that you can start using immediately. Next slide, please. Thanks. So today we're going to have Anastasia, Johan, and Mustafa speak on various components and various tools. And as you know, this is a joint UNSD UNDP initiative, and you'll likely see more of our UNSD colleagues in the sessions to come. Next slide, please. Thanks. Next slide. So our plan for today is to quickly do a recap of what we learned last time. We're going to go into the details of what the chart anatomy looks like. So in other words, what is an axis? How do you bind data and all that? Then we're going to go into 2 different demos for 2 different tools that are openly available. One is the UNDP Vis tool, and the second one is Flourish. And then we're going to have Johan coming in on geospatial visualization, and he's going to talk about how you can use the UNDP GeoHub. The last part is on resources, which will include fundamental resources in terms of the different tools you can use, some of the ones we'll cover today, as well as a few additional ones, and a few additional resources in terms of choosing your colors and overall data visualization best practices. Next slide, please. Thanks. So our objectives for today is to understand what a chart looks like. So what are the different components of a chart? The idea being that we'll cover a few tools today, but if you decide not to use those tools, you'll still be able to use those basics for whatever tool you decide to use. We'll go over importing and exporting regular and map data to predefined visualization templates, and customizing those visualizations to enhance clarity and presentation, and then go into those basics for Flourish, UNDP Vis tool, and the GeoHub. We'll also cover how to embed and share your visualizations with your audiences. Next slide, please. Thanks. And with that, I'll pass it over to Mustafa, who will start on talking us through charts and graphs. Thank you.
Thanks, Andre. Anastasia, can you continue sharing the screen? Then I'll switch when we have the...
Sure.
Thanks. Thanks, Andre, and good morning, colleagues. So for the first half, we'll just quickly go through a recap of what we did in the last session. So if you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so from the last session, like you remember, we went through like good practices, and these were the key points that we discussed about. Like, first, we should understand the data, understand the audience, and then choose the right charts. And this session is mostly going to focus on choosing the right charts and creating a visualization which is more readable and visually attractive, so that the data becomes much more accessible and understandable for normal audience. Can we go to the next slide? So just a quick, since we talk about like using tools here, and we'll be touching on mostly designs of the visualization. So we just recap like the do's and don'ts for the designs of the chart. So if you remember, it was like very quickly going through this list is like keeping it simple, keeping it a very minimal kind of a view, concise, understandable, choosing appropriate colors and accesses, things like those, and avoiding some key pitfalls which are mentioned here. So if you go to the next slide. And we also talked about like different charts, which we had like in the last presentation. In this session, we'll go through some of those charts and how different tools can be used to create those charts using data. And we'll use like mainly two tools for static visualization, which is we'll talk about UNDP Vis tool, and the second one is Flourish. We'll talk about both of them, and then Jan will come for with the geospatial data and how tools can be used to visualize geospatial data. If you go to the next slide. So before we go into like detail of like the tools, what we'll do is that we'll quickly go into the anatomy of the chart, like what are the different components of the charts and things like those, so that it gives you a basic on the design of the chart. And even if you decide not to use any of these tools, but use, let's say, Excel or something like that, you still have an understanding on what are the key components of the chart, which needs to be designed and how they should be designed and things like those. So if we go to the next slide. So this is generally how a chart would look like, that you'll have some text on the top, an area where the visual is, and then some text on the below. So one by one, we'll go through like all these different components of the chart. So like mentioned earlier, every chart should have a good title, which kinds of explain what the chart is. And this is what one of the first key point is. Uh, then basically is the description. So this is an optional thing which you might want to add, might not want to add, depending on how descriptive your title is and how complicated the chart is. So this basically describes what the chart is in a more detail than what the title does. Then we have the color legend. So if we are using multiple colors for representing different parameters, it's always good to present those colors what they mean, so that the users don't get confused why there are different colors for different things. So that's what we call legend, and that's basically shown there. Then we have the chart area, which is the area where the chart or the visual is actually shown. Some of the key things to keep in mind here is that the aspect ratio is very important for communication. So different aspect ratios can communicate different things. So it's always important to keep in mind to have a good aspect ratio to communicate what you want to. We'll go in more detail on what is there in the chart area. Then we have the notes, which is again like some sort of a sub note, footnotes that you might want to add, things about what the data might represent, or if there is any outliers which you might want to add or something like that, then can add that. This is also optional, not necessarily needed for all the charts. And the last one is basically the source, which basically is the data source. So every chart has a data, and it's always recommended to show what the data source is, because the thing with the data source is the fact that it builds in confidence for the user, as well as gives an opportunity for the users to explore the data themselves. So it's always good to mention the data source whenever you have a chart. So yeah, next thing. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So we'll go in more detail about the chart and what the different elements in the chart area is. So here you can see we are representing a bar chart, but you can think of any charts there, like line charts, scatter plots, and things like those. So for the bar chart, the main visual element is bar. For scatter plots, it would be circle. For line charts, it would be lines. Same. Then we have the axes. So we have the two X and Y axis, and it's always good to have like titles for the axis if they are not self-explanatory and they are not mentioned in the title of the chart. It's always good to have axes so that it user can focus on that part. and then can basically look at what those accesses are and understand. Just looking at the graph, they don't have to look at like more details, read more text around it. Then we have the labels, which actually tells what each of these bars represent. In case like both the axes are like continuous axis, then there could be like rather than what bars represent, it might show like how much distance is, what position is one, what position is two, as you can see on the y-axis, which helps in like readability of the graph. So if let's say I want to see what is the value of L, I can just look at the axis and say, oh, it's more than 4. Basically, it's somewhere between 4 and 5. So it helps in the readability of the chart. Can we ticks are something similar, which helps again in the readability, which goes well with the axis labels. So generally we add ticks for again like showing what is the approximate value of certain parameter on the chart. Uh, then data label is basically some text which we add to the graph per se to give more information. So in this case, we'll add values of the bars so that you don't even have to like look at the axes if you don't want to. So you can just look at the look at the graph and get like what is the value for H is 4.5, for example. Um, if we go to grid lines, again, is something which helps in identifying the positioning of the graph, not at all necessary, depending on the what kind of graphs you are using. Like for a bar graph, grid lines might not be necessary. For a scatter plot, it helps in like readability of the graph per se. Then we have annotations, which is like textual key important points that you might want to highlight. This helps in like telling a story with the graph. With a static graph, you can annotate a data point and you can provide more context to that data point, which can help in like storytelling or some kind of like driving more attention of the person to the graph per se. Reference line is again it's similar to annotation. It helps in like communicating a point here. So let's say you want to highlight all the bars which are above a certain point, in this case about 3. Then you can just have a reference line and then you can highlight all the bars which are about 3 in that. Like you user can see that, okay, that's the reference line, and every bar which is about that reference line is either doing good or bad or whatever you want to communicate. So that is something that can be added. Highlight area, again, similar to reference line, it's basically to highlight a particular area of the graph. In bar charts, reference line do the thing, but like if you're looking at scatter plots, highlighted area can help you to divide the graph in like different quadrants, which then you can say that this is the good quadrant, this is the bad quadrant, this is the okay quadrant, and things like those. So that's how highlighted areas work. And lastly, we have the tooltip. So if the graph is interactive, most of the times you might have seen that when you hover on something, it gives you more context about the thing. So let's say you don't want to add values because you want to keep the graph as clean as possible, but at the same time, you want to allow users to see what the value is when they interact with the graph. So that is when tooltips come into picture. And when you hover on a bar, you see what the value is and what the tooltips provides you more context over it. So this is basically, can you go back to the previous slide? So this basically covers the basic anatomy of the charts and different elements in the charts. Not everything is, like I said, completely necessary. It depends on what kind of charts we have, what kind of data we have, and things like those. But this more or less covers how a chart is being composed with like all different charts are mostly composed of like all these things. So if you go to the next slide. So now we have we'll go through a demo of the UNDP WIS tool. Before that, we would like to ask you a question. Andli, if you can start the poll, which is essentially what are the most commonly charts that you use in your work? So we have mentioned some of the charts, and then there's a free text if you want to add that. So let's wait for like 5-10 minutes. Not five, a minute also. I can switch the screen, Anastasia, if you want. Uh, I guess we can end the poll. Okay, so from this we can clearly see that most of the people do use bar charts, line charts, donuts, and maps. And then there are certain people who use like scatter plots and networks. So we will cover like these common charts in like different tools, like especially bar charts and line charts and maps. And I'll just now start demoing the UNDP WIS tool that we have. Just a brief introduction about the tool. Um, is basically, so this is a tool that we have built in-house in UNDP for different colleagues within UN and also like country offices. And it's an open tool where users can basically visualize data pretty simply. So it's a completely open source and free to use tool. You don't need to log in or do anything around it. You just go to the link and then you see this interface. And then you can start using the tool. We have tried to keep it as simple as possible, and we have also tried to like educate users on like good data visualization practices while doing the tools, which I'll show you in a while. So the first step to use the tool essentially is basically locate your data and use your data. So we have multiple ways of like adding data. So you can either upload a CSV which you have. So if you just click on this button, you'll see it will ask you to upload a CSV. I'll just upload a dummy CSV, which I have. And
Uh,
once
sorry,
you want,
sorry, Mustafa, can you zoom in a little bit?
yeah, sorry, just a second. Is this better?
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Sorry. So yeah, like once you upload the CSV, you basically can start using you see what the data is about, and you can start looking at the CSV. You can also edit the data here itself. So for example, you might think that the value for USA is not 346 or something else. You can just quickly edit that value here. So let me quickly edit this value to, let's say, I don't know, 369, this value to 102, and things like those. So I can just quickly edit some values here. And then I can see the data change here. Then once you have uploaded the CSV and you have understood the data, what we ask you to do is basically uh, check if the data formatting is right. So for example, these are all strings, which is like alphanumerical characters. So that's fine. Date is a number, but we don't want to keep date as number. So I'll just go and change this to date. And then we ask you to select the appropriate date format. So this one is basically YYYY, which is correct. So that's fine. And these two are numbers. So we just do that, and we are good to go with the data now once we have done that. We have other features that can be used to effectively fetch more data. Um, which essentially, if we have linked the tool to all the data that we have in UNDP data portal, so you can click here and you see all the data that we have, which is we have around 500 indicators, which you can then search here. So let's say I want human development index. Yeah, so I can just get it from here. Then I basically select the countries that I want it for. So let's say I just want it for Afghanistan. And then I can select like if I want it for all the years that is there, or if I want to have it for a particular year. I can change the data format. Like, do I want indicators as columns? Do I want countries as columns? Or do I want the years as columns? I can change that format. And this is important. While I'll come a bit later why this is important, because this basically governs what kind of graphs you can create with them. And once you have selected the country, the data, and then you can basically just create your data sheet, and it fetches all the data, what we have basically in the portal, and then you can use that. If you have a country code here, you can change the format to alpha 3 code, and then basically you can click this button to add more data about the country. So things like what is the official UN name, what continent does it belong to, what UNDP bureau it belongs to, what is the income group, what is the average latitude and longitude. So you can basically do that to add more context to the data if you want to. And once you are happy with the data sheet that you have created, you are good to go with like to choose a chart. So if you just press next, you get all these charts that are available now, and you can choose whichever charts you want to choose. So you can, if you know what exactly do you want to communicate, like we discussed in the last session about like different chart functions. If you know what you want to do, you can just filter them with this. So if you want to compare, you can see like we have these charts for comparison and things like those. And you can select each graph, and we actually give you a brief introduction about what that graph is, what kind of use cases it is used in, and what is the data format that is required for this graph. And that is where I was when I mentioned like different using different things as columns, like indicators, years, or things. It's important here. So for example, here you need labels as different rows. Here you need dates as different rows. So depending on what kind of things you need, you can create your data in like different format. Once you have done that, then I'll quickly show you how to create a bar chart here. So once, let's say I select bar chart and I'm happy with the selection now. When I go next, it just shows a bar chart to me with my appropriate data. I don't have to do anything. It just gives me a bar chart. We have a lot of customization feature that I'll just demo you. But like you can see here, right? So you can change the size of the graph. So let's say I want the graph to be a bit wider. So I can just change this to 1000, and it will show me I want it to be a bit taller because I want my bars to be a bit broader, sorry, thicker. So let's say I do like, let's say 800 pixels, it just does that. If you want your graph to be responsive, so let's say you are using it in your page or something, and you want it to be responsive, you can just press this button, and the graph would cover the whole area that is available for it. So you have that. There are some extra spacings here. If you want to remove them, you can just remove them by changing these values. So if I just change this value to something like this, so you can remove these spacings everywhere. Let's say you don't want, because it's a single country and you don't want Afghanistan to be mentioned, but you want the years to be mentioned, you can just select years and then the years would be mentioned. You can select whatever dimension you want here. So in this case, because we just have one data, we'll just use the Human Development Index. But if you have like multiple columns with multiple indicators, you can select those. You can also color the graph with like different parameters. So let's say in this case, if I had countries with different continents, I could just do this, and it will basically show me basically it will color the bars with continent basically, and it will show the color key here basically. And then it also gives you by default a tooltip essentially, which shows all the information that you have selected here. You can change the layout. So if this is like horizontal, but you can change it to vertical if you want. You can show, if you don't want to show these values, you feel that it's cluttering the graph, you can hide them, show them. Again, if you don't want to show the ticks, you can just hide them here. Again, if you don't want to show the labels, well, because it's adding clutter, you can hide them. If you don't want to show the legend for some reason, you can hide them. Then you can add also a dark mode, which essentially creates a like a dark mode by default. You can change the background colors here. So we provide you with some palettes here, which are like for better readability. But let's say if you want to create some different background color, you can also do that. So you can do that. You can change the colors of the bars. Again, we provide you like different colors. So if let's say you're focusing on SDGs, then we have like all SDG colors. We have like different colors for male, female. We have like different palettes that we have added. So you can choose any of these colors, but let's say if you want to do a custom color altogether, you can also do that. So something like this. You can add a reference line here. Um, so let me add some. So basically, let's say I want to add a reference line at 0.4. I'll just add 0.4. It adds a reference line, and then I can add a text here. Let's say reference text, and it adds the reference text here basically. And then you can add like a title to the graph. So let me add some test title, some description. And if I want to add footnotes and data source, I can add that. You can also create an interactive link to the source. So let's say if I want to just create like a link to UNDP. If you want to hear the if you want to see the link to UNDP, I can just like add a link here, and it will add a link by default. And um, And basically, here's one feature that we have, especially for our colleagues who are from like Middle East or from countries which have like use either Hebrew or Persian as a script, is basically convert this to right to left. So if you do that, we basically convert it goes right to left, and then you can basically have all the text in Arabic if you want. So you can type Arabic text here, and it will show in Arabic here, basically. So this is one feature which kind of helps colleagues from like Middle East, mainly from Middle East and North Africa, which so yeah, and so yeah, like this is how you can basically design a graph, and then you can add like more values to the tooltip. So let's say if you want to add, let's say you want to add official country name, you can add that. If you want to add continents, you can add that. So you can add more values to the tooltip here. Once you are happy with the graph, you can download the graph as an image to either embed it in your presentation or as an SVG if you want to edit it more in any of the image editing softwares. So you can do that. And one key feature of this tool is that all the data, if you have uploaded the data from your own laptop, it stays on your laptop. For a time period. I'll tell you when it actually we store it on a server, but if you're just downloading the image, the data stays on your laptop. We don't save the data anywhere. Uh, we don't even transfer the data to any servers. It completely stays on your laptop. So it's very good for like data privacy if you just want to create an image here. Now, let's say if you want to embed this graph into a different page or something like that, then you can create an embed code. Now, once you click on this button is when we basically start saving the data. But until and unless you have pressed this button, we don't save your data at all. So once you press this button, then is the time we start saving the data. And then we give you like an ID for the graph. We give you a web URL, which can be used if you want to just share the graph with someone as a URL. We give you like different ways of embedding so that you can use it to embed on your own websites or pages or wherever. And then you can use this to like embed the graph. So yeah, this is how you basically create a graph per se here, like a bar chart. I'll also mention one thing is that you can actually link to a live URL here to fetch data which is maybe live for you. So let's say if I have a URL for a Google Sheet which I've created, I'll just paste that Google Sheet URL here. So I'll paste that Google Sheet URL. I'll say fetch data, and it fetches all the data from that Google Sheet again. I'll change the formatting if I have to, but let's say I'll keep it like this because, and in this case, if you change the data here, it doesn't help because it's getting the live data from the sheet. So it will get the data directly from the sheet. So you will not even, if you change the data, it won't make any difference. So if I go here and if I create a graph, let's say here, okay, so I have to make some changes. Yeah. So if I go here, it basically creates a graph for me. I can change the sizes to, let's say, X maybe. And it basically creates a graph. Let's make it a bit smaller so that it's visible in the screen. Yeah. So let's say I make this as a graph here. Also remove the reference line from before. And then I can embed this graph, let's say. And now, basically, if you look at this link, it will give you a graph, and this graph is directly fetching the data from the Google Sheet. Now, if you change the values in the Google Sheet, which I'll maybe quickly change in the background. So let's say I change the value in the background for the Google Sheet to for US, and I republish it. And if I then yeah, so if I change the background, it's not yet published. It might take some time. And refresh the page, it will show you the live data per se. So this basically fetches the live data from the sheet and shows you the live data. So you can connect live data sources here. Um, yeah, so I'll basically stop here and I'll maybe take some questions if there are other things which are with this tool is that there are multiple graphs that you can use and different kinds of charts that you can create. We also don't allow you to create charts which doesn't support like the data format that you have created. You can see here, it says unsupported data format and it tells you what kind of data format. We also have sample CSVs which you can download to get the data in the right format. I'll quickly just talk about the map, basically. So you can create a map also here. The thing is that we also have maps for like different, all the countries and the subnational map for all the countries. So let's say if I go to France, I can see the subnational map of France. And then you need like, you can have like either the province level or the district level, you can create those and you can add your data to visualize subnational maps here. So we have like all these things and all these maps are compliant to UN system. So they are all like borders and the country names are based on the UN system per se. So yeah, I'll stop here and I'll see like if there are any questions or anything that we can take here.
I see a few questions in the Q&A. Tanya, would you like to come in with your question?
So yeah, I can answer the question anyways, basically. So if you're using one data source, such as does one have to put data source for all? So Tanya, it depends. Like if the visualization is created such that it's a part of a single report, and then you can have one footnote for everything combined, then it's fine. You don't have to add it for everything. But if let's say you have a report where all the visualizations are on a different page, then it's always good to have like some sort of like a reference, some sort of like um, source node there so that users understand that what data is coming from where. Um, Hope that answers the question. how to determine where to, okay, then the second question, which again Tanya had, was how to determine where to add a reference line. Please give an example. So I'll give you an example, which let's say we have human development index, right? So if I just create a chart for human development index again, and I do for, let's say for some 6 countries, randomly selected 6 countries, and I just do it for 2012. Oh, sorry, 2020. Let's say I do this. I fetch the data. I have the data now with me. I can go next and I create a bar chart. Now this gives me a bar chart, but let's say I want to highlight which countries are on high level of human development index. What I can do is either color the bars by that, or I can add a reference line here where I say that, okay, just add like 0.8 and then add like high HDI. So now you can see like, okay, so the only country which has an high HDI is Angola, I guess. So then that in that way, it can help you in like adding reference lines can be used basically in adding more context to the graph. Hope that answers the question. Then there's another question, which is like, if I use a map chart type and want to display, okay, I think so. I just touched upon that, Adel, which is the question is about how can I have like final levels of administrative boundaries. So, which I just touched upon, which is like if you go here and you can basically select the country. So, I think so. Adel is from Tunisia. So if I just select, okay, if I just go to Tunisia here. So yeah, I can see all the districts here, or I can see higher like states levels, so province levels or district levels. I can just do by doing here. Um, the final details of the map can, I think so, Jan will talk about like more like grid level maps here, which again, GeoHub maps, which Jan will talk about, can be embedded in the tool so that then it can be, we generate a link and then that can be used in the in the in the website or somewhere else. Then there is a question which is about, may this tool lead from API sources? So I'm on like with regard to API sources, we will touch upon this in the next session. Uh, we will touch upon this on the next session per se, about like how can we add API sources, because that is more on the coding side of things. So we will go through like in the next session on how you can add APIs on more kind of like fine-grained things around it. There is, for example, in the tool, if we scroll at the bottom, there is a section which is meant for like developers. So which provides you much more flexibility in terms of the design of the graph. So you can do a lot more things here. And you can basically add more customizations to the graph, which are like limited on the UI side. So if we'll talk about these modes in the next session per se. Does it support Arabic? So Tamam is asking, does it support the Arabic language? So like I mentioned earlier, so if you want to do Arabic, the thing is that so I have an English keyboard, so I can't type Arabic, but let me just fetch some random Arabic text from the web. I don't know what it would say, but if I just get something. So if I just get this word, let's say, and if I just basically, so first I would basically convert it into right to left because that's what Arabic, and then we also changed some things to Arabic, like source word, we changed it to translate it to Arabic. But let's say if I just add a title in Arabic, it will show in Arabic here. the description in Arabic, it will show in Arabic here. So in that sense, you can add like anything in Arabic. When it comes to these country names and things like those, that thing you will have to change in the data. So if the data you can change it in Arabic, then it will show in Arabic in the graph. Otherwise, it will show in English. So that comes from the data set. So hope that answers that question. No, we don't, in the tool, we don't have more than admin two, but I think so Jan will talk about how we can have like final details when it comes to geospatial data. For maps and geospatial data, is there a specific coordinate system or format the data needs to be? So when it comes to maps, what we expect is that you have a column which has the country codes, so ISO country codes, because that is what we are matching when we are looking at the maps. So if you have a column which has the ISO country codes, it can be just a normal CSV file. It doesn't matter, but it needs to have a column which has basically alpha 3 codes. And then if you want more details, you can add it here essentially using the automatic pulling of the data. Now, when it comes to subnational maps might not have alpha 3 codes per se. So what we have is, let's say we have provided you with a list of all the ISO codes that we'll expect in the data to have. So if you go here, you'll see all for like Tunisia, let's say. So this is all the columns that we'll expect Tunisia to have, for example. All the values for the ISO that we expect Tunisia to have at admin level 2. So this you can very quickly do using that. Then there's a question about, are we able to do quadrant chart with the tool? So you will be able to do quadrant charts with the developer modes. With the tool, you cannot do quadrant charts, but what you can do essentially is basically you can create a highlight area. So let's say I have this scatter plot and I want to highlight the area from, let's say, I don't know, 0.6 to 0.6 to 1. And then from y-axis, I want to highlight from 0.4, let's say. So it basically adds a background in behind it. I think so it's a bit faint, but so I don't know if you can see it on the uh, on the on the screen sharing, but it does add a background behind it. So that's there. Are we so but in the developer tool section, which we'll discuss tomorrow, you can do any kind of quadrant charts. You can add as many quadrants as you want. When get data from uh, uh, live Google Sheet. So I just showed you. So you need to just fetch there, basically put your live Google Sheet link here and then fetch data and do the same thing. And you'll get the data from live Google Sheet. Let me see if this has changed yet. So yeah, you can see here, I changed the data for that one to 10. And now in the Google Sheet, and it shows here 10. So it basically gets the data live from the Google Sheet. Uh, can we use API as a data source? Again, like mentioned, with the tool you cannot, but we'll go through the session next week where we'll talk about how to use this section for API section. Does this mean I need to convert all my sheets all the time? You need to have it in the proper format. That's the only thing. And it needs to be in CSV basically. Other than that, I don't know, like when you say convert, what exactly are you referring to? If you can add more detail, that would be great there. We don't have DVE as a language, but we can definitely look into it. Like we can add it because it's very simple to add the thing. So we will add it on the add it on the um, add it on the tool soon. Your shape will change when data. Yeah, so it basically the bars will change when you have the data. This tool has auto refresh. Yeah, so whenever you visit the graph again, it will fetch the new data um, and then uh, and then basically you can see the tools. I'll just take two more questions and then I'll move on to I'll hand it over to Anastasia for the other tool. Does the tool support privacy or will the data we work on be kept? So like I mentioned, if you're not embedding the graph at all, if you're just there to download the graph, then it's completely privacy. There is nothing which stops us from nothing which makes us keep your data. We don't keep your data. It's only on your laptop. If you click on this embed code button, then we stole your data. So that is when we keep your data. But if you're just creating a graph for the presentation purposes or report purposes, you don't have to click on this button at all, and then your data stays on your laptop. So it's completely private in that sense. And how big is the file that can be uploaded? Anything within reason, I would say like around, so we have tried it with like at least a file with 20,000 rows and 20,000 rows and around 20 columns. And it worked fine. So I think so. From basic testing, it seems like around 100,000 rows should work fine. So yeah, that we can use to generate graph with an application we developed. Just the last question. So in the next session, we'll go through with this API thing, what you're talking about, Ibrahim. Well, we'll show the library which we have created to build this tool. And then, yeah, so we'll go through that in the next session next week. I will hand it over to Anastasia in the interest of time now. If there are any more questions, I'll just answer them on the thing now. So yeah, thanks. Thank you. All to you, Anastasia.
Thank you. Let me share my screen first. Okay. So today I'll be giving a quick tour of Flourish, the tool for creating interactive data visualization that doesn't require much technical skills or coding. Just a quick note, we do not endorsing or advertising this tool, so it's just for the demonstration purposes to help you explore different visualization options. So to give you a sense of what Flourish can do, let's check out a list of available charts. Here we have simple charts like bar charts, line charts, maps, and there are lots of more complex ones such as Sankey chart, network charts, and much more. Next, there are many interactive and dynamic charts, and here where Flourish gets really interesting, and we will cover one of these charts in the demo in a couple of minutes. And also Flourish lets you create storytelling visuals with slides and sequences that guide the audience step by step through the complex data inside. So this feature is also quite nice. So now let's go to the Flourish and let's start to create our own chart. First, let me change the screen. So now let's try to create our own chart. This is Flourish website. First, we need to sign in. We need to click on this button in the top upper corner. And then once we signed in, we can see this workspace with all our charts which we previously created. To create a new chart, we need to click on the new visualization button. Here we can select a chart type, but let's start from the basic bar chart. Now we are in the chart editor. Let's have a second to look at the interface. So we have two main tabs. The first one is the preview tab, and here we can customize all of the visual elements, such as titles, colors, labels, and so on. And in the data tab, we can upload the data and we can map columns with the different visual elements. So I have some sample data and we can try to upload it. So now we have a data here, and we can also change numbers, or we can also add rows and columns just to customize our data. And then we need to map the columns with the elements on the chart. And this step tells the chart which data belongs where. So for example, for the labels, so labels are used to identify each bar or point on the chart. And in our case, we want one bar to represent one country. So we need to map a country column with the labels. And sometimes Flourish does that automatically, but it is always a good idea to check. Then values are the actual data points that we want to plot on the chart. Like, for example, we have a numerical data for an indicator for each country. So we need to check if the column B is in the value item. Then the next items can be kept empty unless we want to create like some complex visualizations. So now let's go to the preview tab and see what we can customize here. So we won't go through the all sections because there are too many and we do not have so much time, but we will cover the basic ones. So the first one is colors. So here we can select a color palette from the list, but at the same time we can click on this button and we can edit colors as we want. Then the next section is bars. Here we can define the thickness of the bar, and that's how we can change the height of the chart, for example. Then labels. So we can add labels to the bars, and we can do that with this toggle. And we can identify the placement of the labels, their size, their font, and there are really a lot of customization options. Now there are two sections for access settings. So for example, we have data labels here, so it doesn't, we do not actually need to show x-axis here. So we can actually hide it by pressing this button. Then the next important section is the layout. Here we can change fonts as we like, but please keep in mind that some fonts are really hard to read. So it is recommended to use more neutral and simple fonts like this one. Also in this section, we can change the text direction from left to right to left, and it's also very important for localization purposes. Then we have header, where we can add graph title, description, and other notes. We can also upload a logo if we want to. And in the footer section, we can add a source, we can add a source link, and for example, some notes for the chart. And this covers the main sections. There is one more, which is a bit more advanced. So for that, we need to go to the data section again, and we can have a look at this row filter item. So here we can identify by which column we want to filter our data. So for example, we want to filter by region. So we need to put column C here. and then go back to the chart. And we can see that we have a drop-down where we can select a region, and the chart will be reloaded automatically. In the controls and filters section, we can actually configure these filters. So for example, we can add all item just to show all countries by default. And we can also select the type of the control. So we can have a drop down, but here we can't see all the regions at once. And we can also select a segmented button option where we can see all regions. And this option is recommended to use when we have just a few items. So that's it. Once we're happy with the chart, we can export and save it. So we can click on this button and we can download an image. We can add a name. We can select an image format. We can also specify the size which we want to have, and we can download by pressing this button. If we want to embed the chart in the website, and we need to keep interactive features, we need first to publish the chart in the Flourish, and then we have this green area with the code snippet, which we need to copy and paste in our website. So this covers like a basic settings for a simple bar chart. Now let's have a look at some advanced and a bit more dynamic chart. But first, I would like to ask to add a poll with one question. Yeah, so how often do you use animated charts in your work? Let's have a couple of minutes to answer. Okay, I think it's good to go forward. So if we end the poll, we can see that most of the people use the animated charts rarely or never, or somewhat like not very often, which is understandable because most of the tools do not allow us to create animated charts. So we can't use them often. But animation can be a powerful tool for making data more engaging, and especially when we want to show changes over time, because it captures attention of the users and they follow the changes and try to see how the story unfold. And so, for example, the Flourish have a couple of dynamic animated charts, and one of them is a racing chart. So here, this chart uses animation to show how categories or countries racing across the screen, and the bar changes the size and the position just to show how the ranking changes over time. So, and this chart is quite easy to create. So for that, we need to go to the data section, and we just need to set up data for each country for each time variable. And basically that's it. Then we can go to the timeline and animation section, and we can change some settings. For example, we can show additional chart for the in the bottom of the chart. We can remove the chart like at all. There are also a lot of settings that we can configure. For example, the speed, of course, the colors and so on. So I encourage you to explore different dynamic charts in Flourish because it's really really nice features. But now let's get back to our slide. So as we have seen just now, there are lots of customization in the Flourish, and I would say it takes a bit of time to get used to finding like all the necessary settings. But here we have a link to the resources and tutorials, and this link can help you if you have any questions on about Flourish. So just to wrap up, we have shown you UNDP database tool and Flourish tool. These are both really great visualization tools, and each of them has its own set of features that makes it useful for different purposes. So as a conclusion, let's recap their key features. So the UNDP Viz tool, first of all, you do not need to sign in, and the tool ensures data privacy until you're embedding the chart. Then next, the tool has integration to the data catalog with the development indicators, and it also allows you to connect visualization to the public link and to have up-to-date visualizations, which like updates automatically. Then the tool follows UN standards for country names, borders, and also it includes subnational maps for all countries and territories. Then it has a script mode. It's another really great feature which we will explore in the next session next week. Additionally, the tool supports right to left alignment, which makes the chart accessible for languages that require this orientation. And lastly, the tool follows good design practices by default, so you do not need to worry about how the visualization looks and how accessible it is for the users. And Flourish offers a wide range of chart types from simple visuals to 3D maps and animations. It also includes interactive storytelling options like slides and quizzes, which is great for like engaging users and with the data stories. The tool also supports right to left orientation, and there are even much more features and settings in the paid version of the tool. So that's it about the Flourish. I encourage you to explore and test different visualization tools because the right tool can make a big difference in how effectively you communicate your data. And now, I don't know if you have time for Q&A, but let's answer a few questions if we have, and then I will hand it over to my colleague who will cover geospatial visualizations. So I'm not sure we have any questions now. Andrei, can you Can you double check it?
Anastasia, one question is that is the animation available in the free plans or is it a paid feature? That has been asked multiple
Okay.
times.
Yeah, animated charts are available in a free version. So, for example, this race bar chart, which we checked, it's included in the free version. And there are lots of other animated charts which are free. So.
There's a question about whether this tool can read from an API.
It can, but unfortunately, this is a paid function. There.
Can I come here? I don't think so. It can read from an API. It can read from a live data sheet. It cannot read from an API. But if you have a live CSV sheet somewhere, then it can read from. But again, like Anastasia mentioned, it's a paid version.
There's also a question about how much the paid version costs. I think there's only an enterprise version of the paid version, so you need to go there as your organization.
I guess, colleagues, if there are no other questions, maybe we can move forward with the geospatial.
Sure.
Thank you, Anastasia. I will share my screen, colleagues, and I hope you let me know if you can hear me well. Let me know if you can see my screen. All right. So I'm going to continue now and link a little bit on the work that the presentation we done last week when we went through the basic data types. It was very summary. I have very little time, so I'm going to have to be brief. I have actually quite a lot of slides, but I'm not going to go through everything, and I'm going to try to be as much as possible. I'm going to try to be as much as possible in online in real time and demo the things. But at the same time, I also have I have some slides. So in essence, I actually, with the geospatial data, it's always special, mainly because of coordinates. So it always includes location. We know that from the last slides. But it's also, the geospatial data is really handled by professionals, and there are reasons for that. So these professionals bear a certain kind of, responsibility. Usually, I'm part of a team in SDGI in the BPPS. And I'm also helping many colleagues providing various type of support. So my role is here to help also colleagues as much as possible, because this is a little bit special. The geospatial data is different. At the same time, the geospatial visualization needs to make meaningful visualization. We need to make the best out of data, especially these days. There's a lot of geospatial data being produced mainly by remote satellites and various data platforms. And at the same time, the geospatial visualization has to, similarly to what my colleagues already discussed, we have to ensure that we present we are not misinterpreting information, and we're not, insofar as possible, we are not doing mistakes. Now, this session here is basically based on on GeoHub. I'm going to start actually a new window here, because I have this bar with I have this bar with my browser. Now, the GeoHub is a platform that we built within SDGI, and it can do basically. It's focused on bringing a lot of data together, and it's focused on creating visualization, but also doing analytics. So it's a quite complex system that is cloud-based mainly, and I have to tell you that in essence. authenticated users. We have an authentication system that is mainly supporting UNDP, some corporate authentication from UNDP, but also GitHub. Because we have many colleagues from other organizations, third parties, mainly developers, they want to get access to the platform. So once you authenticate to GeoHub, and I'll ask my colleague to share the link in the chat, please, Andre or Anastasia. Once you authenticate, it's possible that for you as a user to upload your own data, to publish it, and to control who can actually who can read it, or it's up to you to decide. So the platform, as I said, has these parts. It's concerned with data, with maps and or visualization and analytics or tools, right? So the data section, I said, it's here. It's once you log in, I logged in here. So I have a couple of settings. I'm not going to go into all of the details because it's a big system. But we have a data store which is searchable, taggable, and also it's possible to upload your data. I'm not going to necessarily upload here. This is a complex mechanism in place that is taking your data and converting into web-compatible formats. And those versions, those representations of your data are stored together with the original data somewhere in the cloud, and then you can access them, right? Now, when we move, similarly, I think, Andre, maybe you can create a pool now very quickly. If you can pull it on. I was wondering if you are familiar with this data. We know already how many, what are the main data type. I'm curious who uses what type of data mainly here, because I know then maybe I can focus a little bit more on the most common, but as I see, this is pretty okay. Points, it's surprising to me a little bit that points are used quite a lot. I would have said that the polygons probably would be used more because in development work and in the United Nations environment, we tend to represent a lot of information at administrative levels, admin 0, 1, and 2, which corresponds to some kind of hierarchical system, not necessarily associated always with district provinces as and countries, provinces, and districts, because there's a lot of heterogeneity. So we can see, this is quite interesting. We can see that many of you are familiar with point data. To some degree, it's good. I think we'll move forward. So let me then go and talk a little bit about the points. So when we talk of points, are the most simple things. Although they are simple, they always usually represent discrete variables. But it's also easy to crowd a map with points. So normally we want to use high contrast, very saturated colors, and also it's a very interesting thing if the tool support, because many times we want to create a map or visualization, we need labels, right? So the labels is also good to have a halo because good to have a halo, for example, good to have some kind of border around the labels to make a clear distinction between the data point on the map and the label associated with it. As I said, it's very easy to overcrowd it, and we'll see that the platform that we use has some options on how not to overcrowd data. And last but not least, there's several ways how we can visualize data. I'm just going to go briefly through them, and then we're going to go quickly into the system to see what exactly how we do that. So we can simply show them, we can classify them using color, assign a very different color to every property of the point, or just use proportional symbols to signify and show and represent a property that varies across all this space of points. At the same time, it's very interesting that we can use and create heat map layers. And they have a very specific good use. There are many times they are not used properly. They are misused, abused, or cluster. So let's move on. And I'm going to move to the map section here and create an empty map. I don't like this window here. So let's type buildings. So in my map currently, I have a tab. I put it on the right side in my settings. It normally, if you don't log in, or you have it on the other side. So I prepared a couple of data sets here. GeoHub is pretty good. It's pretty quick at looking, and by typabilities, I found 4 layers here, and we designed it in a way that we can directly add the data, but we can also inspect. It's possible to inspect the data, and for directly from here, it's possible to choose what type of representation we want to do. So this data set, it's pretty interesting because it's actually quite large. It represents a small upazila, which is administrative level somewhere in Bangladesh. And it actually features over 200,000 buildings, and these are centuries. So, once I click on these properties, we already talked that, this is the simplest representation. And you can see here, for example, this overcrowding. So now you can see the detail, the level of detail and how the multitude of points. This blue color here is not something that I really like. So let me go and quickly change it to something quite crisp. Okay, so you can see that this is the simplest representation. I said very easy to overcrowd it, and keep in mind that I'm looking at here at over 200,000 points. So basically, the second option here is, if we want to, every point in geospatial data has some serious attributes organized in columns. So these are buildings coming from Google, for example. And they have a property called confidence, which obviously represents the confidence of how the people who created this data set basically they have a property of how confident they are, and you can see the intervals created automatically. So just and basically here this is a sequential property. This is a sequential attribute, which I just use colors directly to discriminate the points. I created automatically intervals. At the same time, it's possible, for example, to use this kind of unique values for each point. But let's use a different type of color here to assign this automatically. So now suddenly using a different color and a different type of ramp of color sequence, I went from Google to Microsoft, OSM, and others. This is a complex data set, as I said, and we can even, it's possible to see here. I can go and change this one to blue so it's more visible. You always have to keep in mind that because I have so many buildings, I always choose to choose how to represent them. Many times these points are hidden, and the software library, the engine, does a lot of work for us, but it's always possible to actually choose some slightly optimized version of displaying. And the last option from those 3 was to actually create, to classify these icons using the size of confidence. Here, here we have a display of using the confidence, which is represented using proportional symbols. So the bigger the confidence, the larger the symbol. The color is set here. We'll set it unique. We'll set it to maybe something more red. And this generates, this gives us an idea how to create this, and a unique proportional map. Again, as I said, there's a lot of data. I'm repeating this, so that's why if I would, for example, just say always show everything that overlaps, suddenly it's very hard to make a lot of sense unless I zoom in properly. So these are the basic type of the point data, and I'm going to try to now to showcase this heat map. So heat maps, if we have a lot of points, visualization specialists realize that it might be better to actually show this data as heat map, where the emphasis actually is on density. It's on density, not on the attributes or anything else. And heat maps have a couple of properties. Let me close this. I'm going back to the heat map here. This is the heat map ramp, color ramp individually. So GeoHub supports this by default. And heat maps have 4 characteristics. The color is the first one, the intensity, and we can see exactly what this means if we go to the heat map. We have the intensity. It's a global multiplier explaining point influence. usually it's associated with zoom level. So these heat maps are not really easy to interpret, and they should never be used to interpolate anything. They are just shown, it should be used to show density. And in the picture we have here like a heat map, which is some utility points related to sewage with the data points as well in the right side with columns. So we have let's continue. We have intensity, we have the weight. This is the the attributes. So these are all like parameters that are adimensional. They can be tied to some attributes, but we have to be very careful how that is done. And we don't support that because that can get very tricky. So by default, we just created some default sliders with values. We have the radius property, how far the heat extends, and we're going to go and see most of them. So for example, this is the effect of heat map intensity. You can see just by moving the slider, I'm changing the way this looks like. The radius, again, to some degree, they overlap, and it's not easy to understand. But with a lot of experimentation, one can get a better sense, for example. And you can already see just by looking at this clutter previously with proportional symbols, it's not necessarily easy to basically make sense of the data. But suddenly I can see because these are buildings, I can already see basically the built-up areas. So the heat of weight, again, in theory they're all different. In practice, it's not necessarily easy, but this tool makes it quite easy. And as I said, it also handles a lot of them. At the same time, there's a lot of type of data that I wanted to show, but I don't think I'm going to go here. So I wanted to load initially here. This is a tool to display this as cluster maps. So what are the cluster maps? So another way to handle a lot of data, because this is what GeoHub, basically Spatial Cloud, can do, is to create a cluster map where then many points are aggregated. And you can just see a few, and by clicking on them, you can then zoom kind of in. So this is a very like specialized way to aggregate the points and display them based on zoom level. Usually these clusters declutter the map. And maybe what is interesting also, I wanted to show you something which is not necessarily in the web environment available, and I don't even have it here. So I have created here a special data set which looks like this. On my map, you can see that it's actually just a couple of points, but I managed to symbolize it, to create a pie chart. So the last way that or style that I wanted to show you is that points can also be displayed as pie charts. It's not easy, and we have this on the GeoHub wishlist because I decided that we are going to implement it. In essence, I decided we are going to implement it, and right now it's not supported. That's why I'm showing you QuantumJS, for example, with this layer, because normally desktop software is much more powerful than web environments. So yeah, okay. These are the main like point data, and because most of the people tend to use points, I wanted to go first and maybe in most detail through these points. The second category, if you remember, are lines. Normally, lines are used for connectivity. They can be differentiated similarly to for example, points using. They can differentiate using colors or using attribute where we have only thickness. If you try to use lines and symbolize and display them using something different than a property related to thickness, it might look very awkward. And lines are also, another property that we have here. Let me go to the data now and try to. I have a data set here, Narok, and I do have some. This is a multi-layer data set. I have these sewer pipelines. We can, the mini-map zooms automatically to this data set. Let's try to add them. I'm going to turn my buildings and heat map off automatically, and we can focus now a little bit on this line. But it's very basic. I'm not going to go into many details, but we can use again a constant line. We can use a pattern. This is quite interesting. So you can get various, like probably the most useful way how to how to handle these things is to just use various patterns. I'm just increasing the patterns for all of this. So you know, lines can be displayed just similarly to points, very simply thin. You can differentiate them using color or differentiate them using pattern. I think pattern is the most useful here. I have to accelerate because we don't have a lot of you know, lines. Here we have an image of simple lines, simple colors, and then using thickness to discriminate some of these things. There are other very specialized representations of lines, but they are not used on a daily basis. These are very specific. Kepler, for example, this tool has them. So, but they require various type of data, multidimensional or temporal data. For example, there is a trig type of layer, which needs like 4-dimensional. For every point, you need temporal dimension for every point. So, you know, it's quite complicated even to create this kind of data. And these have been developed by Uber, this tool, for example. I think that you know, the polygons are probably you know, are here like a large category that is naturally comes as next. So polygons usually represent and are associated with areas, but polygons are always formed from lines and an area. So they have an outline, and this is also useful to know because you can make, you know, slight, very detailed sense of this. You can use it. They are most complex, and they're quite suitable to be represented as you know, in a 3D space. So similarly to point line and polygons, okay, I think that there are some questions here that we might want to take on some questions. To Jasmine, no, we cannot import SLD because we use a mapping engine that doesn't use SLD. It uses its own, yeah, you know, its own representation. If the other question is if a GeoHub allows exporting, absolutely. Maps can be saved as JSON documents. The mapping engine can restore them then, and they become, you know, they can be shared. So in fact, we actually have a whole section here. You know, if I'm going now to the map section, these are all documents. If I open this one, for example, this is just a basic map. You can see its URL here. The way to share a map is to click on this icon here and choose how you want to publish it. You want to make it public, you want to make it with your organization, or you want to keep it for yourself, and then you get a URL, and that URL can be shared. Like I said, it's possible also to load these lines as you know, as polygons as lines. Let me take this off, and I'm going to try to load. We have built a clean energy equity index, a geospatial layer at the continent level, quite large, let's say. And you can see here when I load the polygon, I can bring it in simply to create choropleth maps, you know, or using various color ramps. I can actually create 3D, or I can bring it as a map. So directly when I add this data to the system, there are these options that are going to drive how you can interact with the layer. Because once you have loaded data into the engine, into the map engine, it's not easy to transform it and represent it as something different. It's also possible to use transparency and other tricks, but in essence, the data is loaded in a different way, you know, controlling it from here. So I'm going to demonstrate, for example, a very low. We're going to try to bring this continent level data set. This is quite a large data set, and what I'm going to do, just like with the points and lines, we have a simple representation which you can see right here. I'm going to use label, for example, and you can see there is a lot of detail. This is the halo, for example. I was talking about this halo property. You know, I can control the font size, for example, make it a bit smaller. I can control the font type. There's a couple of fonts here. I can choose which property I want to use. There's a lot of properties that I'm going to be using the basic CI. So once I load it, this is a simple representation, but I can create now this chloropet map. And now I'm going to go probably back and talk about this because it's the right time. We already talked about this, about how measurement scale are. These come from statistics and how the attributes and properties are measured. So we have, various type of columns. Some of them will be representing interval data, other ratio data. Some of them will be nominal. For example, let's say a nominal value was like, would be the valve type. And ordinal data, for example, this is usually some social economical sciences come with ordinal data and based on distributions. So together with this knowledge, then it's actually possible to exploit all this is embedded here. So by choosing a color ramp, for example, that is, if you have this data, this is a sequence from 0 to 1. So basically, I'm going to use a sequential map, but maybe I'm going to choose, this type. I can easily reverse it, and you can see this is operating at a high level here. And when it comes to classification of the data, these classification methods are very important. They break the intervals down. It's also possible to add them live here, and basically do your own classifications. If I type here, these intervals are linked to each other, and I'm changing the displaying of this. GeoHub supports various methods, and as I said here in the slides, it depends on what kind of distribution has the column. Various types of different types of classification are going to perform better based on this distribution. Normally, you have to know your data, and then based on this distribution knowledge and the color map, depending on what type of map you want to create, basically this is going to allow you to create easily to change, for example, the color map. So GeoHub supports all these tools depending on your type of attribute and what the goal of the map, because every map, these are thematic maps, every has a goal. You can just play around, and it's possible to change these color maps, to change the classification methods, to adjust it. For example, one thing there's one mention I want to note. This what I'm doing here is actually a very processing intensive thing. So I have probably over 1,000 polygons displayed here live. There's a lot of data, and I'm tricking the system. That's why I'm not going to be as accurate as working in an ArcGIS or QuantumGIS on a desktop. I'm using some techniques like histogram sampling, where I just get the histogram of these columns and I'm sample. So I'm not going to be as precise, but this is a compromise we agreed to do because mainly because of the fact that we wanted to have a very responsive tools, despite of being able to visualize a lot of data. So I don't think I have time to go to the raster, but this is because I'm running out of time. But what I wanted to show you also is this 3D display. So I'm going to add the same type of layer as a three-dimensional one here. And it's very similar to the previous one. We are going to use the CI, and maybe this color wrap. And the difference in here is that we can extrude. This type of visualization allows us to extrude and create, for example, a three-dimensional visualization. You can see how fast is my rendering engine. It's pretty fast. It allows me to create a very interesting visualization of the clean energy equity across the whole continent. So I can basically, similarly to the chloropet map, this is even more intuitive because it not only gives you information of really using the color, but it gives you we are exploiting the third dimension. We're making a lot of use of this axis to create very meaningful visualization, and this helps us to communicate the process much better. You can see here, for example, how easy it is to get a grasp of relative differences between various admin units for this particular index. I think I'm going to stop here. I went very quickly through all of them. We do have slides. All that I said here, there's some recommendation, and the last one, the last part, which I actually am not going to go because there is no time, but I knew that. is the good part is that whatever we've done with raster, we try to kind of create a framework here that is similar. So you have similar classification methods, similar color ramps, and the raster data is either discrete, like a nominal. This is land use, for example, which has urban, all these classes. Or also we have also classified continuous data like elevation and stuff like that. So GeoHub supports this data. All this type of data, half an hour is very little. Probably if there's a need, we're going to get back maybe one day to it. There's a question here that how can I use this map in your system? So there might be ways to use this map in your system directly. I'm not 100% sure that what I'm going to say now is valid, but maybe so in essence, we are using something that Mapbox created. It's called JSON. It's a style. So these are basically vector type of visualization type. So in a classical desktop system is going to be very tricky to use them unless your desktop application can consume this type of data. There might be options how to do it. Normally, the data inside can be it's the easiest thing to do is to see what kind of reference. I'm not aware of desktop tools. I know there are some tools that were used to open this kind of documents, Mapnik, for example, which allow you to style those maps. So they are tools that can do that. But whether this is part of a standard, I would probably say no. QGIS might be in future supporting these kind of standards. But all this is based on rendering engine. We use MapLibre, which is based on Mapbox. I think, Andre, I think I'm going to pass to you now. So okay, there is one more question here. So let's see if, yes?
And before you pass to Andre, I think so there is one hand raised.
Yes.
And after that, maybe what I would like to do is basically show the linkage between the database tool and the GeoHub in terms of embedding.
Okay, Mustafa. So I'll pass to you. There is this question.
Yeah.
We have a question from I don't know if please colleagues, whoever raised the question, please come in. Maybe you can just type it, or I don't know if you can ask us. These are the. I don't see any more question here. There are these two.
It was a mistake.
There was a hand raised. Maybe it was accidentally. Okay, Mustafa, please,
Yeah.
I'm giving you back the floor so you can show how GeoHub map can be brought into the FX, and then to Andre.
Yeah, so just a very quick demo in terms of like how these maps could be embedded in a web page or a website very easily. So again, like if I go to the maps, I can, like Jan mentioned, there's a list of all the public maps. Those are available. You can click on any of them. So let's say I click on this clean energy one. It takes me to this page, and there is a page called the share link. I go there and I copy this link, which says map style URL. So I can copy this. I can go back to the database tool, just go next. There is a section for getting GeoHub maps. So if I click here and go next, I can just copy paste that URL here, and then it will show the map here. That's it. And then you can, again, using the same embed code functionality, you can get an embed code and then use that embed code in your own website, however you want to use it. So in this case, you can also use a combination of VisTool and GeoHub map to embed it like fairly quickly in that sense. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you. Over to you, Andre.
Thanks, Mustafa. I'll share my screen very quickly. But thanks so much, colleagues. This wraps up our session for today. Let me know if you can see my screen. Oh, sorry, technical glitches. What we wanted to do at the end was to share a few resources and tools that you can use going forward. As we mentioned, we don't endorse any of the tools that we just mentioned, but we thought we can give you a few options to choose from. So first, we're presenting a few color tools. We'll share all of these in the email following this session, along with the recording. But these are tools that will help you make the best choices in terms of the color palettes, and also to create visually accessible data visualizations. In terms of visualization tools, we've added a few short blurbs about a few of the visualization tools that we spoke about today, like the UNDP Viz tool and Flourish, but you can also decide to use either Data Wrapper or Raw Graph. And in terms of dashboard tools, you can use the UNDP Viz tool in script mode, which is something we'll cover next week, as well as Tableau or Power BI. For geospatial, you always have the choice to use the GeoHub, which Johan just demoed, as well as either Kepler or QGIS. I should mention that all of these are free to use, so they should be accessible to everyone. QGIS, I know there was a question about that earlier. QGIS can also be used offline. So thanks. The next session will be next week on November 5th, starting at the same time. And we hope to see you then. Thank you so much for your participation. And do let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.